now come in Descartes' Descartes' Meditations on First Philosophy. We come now to that passage in Meditation 1 where he goes over the things that can be doubted in a very systematic way. Again, the point here is to attack the foundations of knowledge, not as an end in itself, but as a means to the end of restoring them more on a more solid foundation, because the foundations of knowledge are these, well, we can call them common sense principles, the kind of thing Thomas Reid was talking about, actually. The world outside my mind exists. My five senses put me in contact with it. The past exists. My memory is a source of information about the past. Other people exist. All those things, all those common sense principles. Descartes thinks these are the foundations of knowledge, and they're not solid. We need to find a solid foundation for knowledge. And actually, Descartes will restore the common sense principles at the third level of the foundation. Or if you prefer to think of these levels and foundations as exactly the same thing, the third brick, or the second layer of bricks on top of the foundation. The foundational, absolutely basic belief is, I exist. I think, therefore I am. On top of that, he'll build the belief God exists. On top of that, he'll restore the common sense beliefs. But we're getting way ahead of ourselves. That's stuff that comes later. So, here in Meditation 1, we are systematically doubting everything. Except I exist, because that's the one thing that can't be doubted. But we don't even get that far. We just get as far as doubting everything else systematically. Now, you can go through this in a not strictly Cartesian way. That is to say, you can neglect some of the stuff he says in the text. And maybe I'll just do it orally and then get to the text and see how he does it. But you can go systematically through, all the things that can be doubted by tackling in particular the foundations of knowledge and using thought experiments, especially from ridiculous sci-fi movies, but other movies can work too. So here's one way you can go through the method of doubt. Oh, and you have to do it on an individual basis, because one of the first things to be doubted is everyone else. Like, I can doubt you exist. You can doubt I exist. That's actually one of the first things to doubt. So we can't do the method of doubt together. No one can do the method of doubt with anyone else. Only one solitary mind can undergo the method of doubt at a time, and all by himself. All right, so one of the first things you can doubt, I'll go through this systematically using some thought experiments and get closer to the absolute doubting of everything except that crucial point, I exist, which we'll talk about in the next video, hopefully. My social reality can be doubted. I could be on The Truman Show, and everything about the way the world seems to me to be, or at least part of it that is made of people, is all fake. It's all an illusion. It's all a deception. Maybe trees are real, but the people aren't real. Or at any rate, they're not. My relationship with them isn't what it appears to be. It's all fake. All right, so maybe the people themselves are fake. Maybe they're not just actors pretending to be in this relationship with me that they're pretending to be in, and my whole social reality is fake. Maybe the people aren't even conscious beings. Maybe they're just robots. And you can keep going with this. Maybe I am in the Matrix. Or maybe I'm not in the Matrix as such, because there's specific details about how that simulated reality works in that story. Maybe I am in a mad scientist's laboratory. The brain in a vat is a fairly standard thought experiment for philosophers. Maybe I am in a mad scientist's laboratory, hooked up to some sensors, and the computers are there's wires in my brain, and computers are feeding sensory information to my brain, and very similar to the Matrix, I'm living in a virtual reality. And maybe it's just the brain. Maybe I don't even have the body. It's just the brain attached to the computers. And maybe, continuing the deception even further, maybe I don't even have the brain. Maybe I'm just floating in space, a mind floating in space, being deceived now, not by computers or a mad scientist, but being deceived by some very powerful demon who delights in tricking me, or God, if God is some sort of a cruel prankster, or something like that. And maybe I'm a mind not even floating in space. Maybe even space isn't real. I'm just a mind, not even in a space, but just a mind being deceived again by God, if God's a jerk, or some malicious, all-powerful, or very powerful demon who delights in deceiving me. And so if I'm thinking all this, I might think, well, nevertheless, 2 plus 2 equals 4, right? I can trust math. I can trust the forms of logic. If it's true that if x, then y, and if x is also true, then y must be true. Modus ponens is the name of that form in deductive logic. So surely I can trust logic and math, or at least deductive logic, and 2 plus 2 equals 4, and 1 plus 1 equals 2, and all that. But now, stepping back from the powerful demon thought experiment, even as things are now, assuming I still have the brain, the body, and I'm in three-dimensional space, and people are what they appear to be, it's possible someone could, some mad scientist could figure out exactly how to jab wires into my brain to deceive me about math, right? That's theoretically possible, isn't it? In theory, a mad scientist could figure out exactly how to fiddle with my brain so that I would believe that 2 plus 2 equals 5. So I am fallible, even with math. And it's also possible that psychological conditioning could make you get these things wrong. Like when Captain Picard says he actually believed there were, I forget the numbers. I think it was 3 lights. 3 lights, 4 lights. I think there were, I can't remember. There were 4 lights, and the Cardassian torturing him wanted him to say there were 3 lights or something like that. And after a certain amount of torture and psychological conditioning, Descartes actually believed what the Cardassian wanted him to believe. And that can happen. Or drugs. Drugs could possibly deceive you. But then you can make this more advanced and sophisticated. It's also possible, of course, that God could trick you into believing that 2 plus 2 equals 5, or that malicious demon. And that means you can't trust math either. At least it's fallible, which is to say it can be doubted, which is to say it's not anywhere where you can find a perfectly solid, 100% certain foundation for knowledge. You need to find that foundation somewhere else. So, all of these things can be doubted, and there's no certainty to be found there. Maybe I should clarify what is the criterion for doubt. The criterion for doubt is a thing could possibly be false. And the strategy for doubting is to attack the foundations of our beliefs. And basically that means that if reason has failed me once, I have to assume it's never 100% certain. If my senses have failed me once, I have to assume they're not 100% certain either. And if anything else has failed me once, memory, people, then those things are also not 100% certain, and therefore nothing from them can be considered undoubtable, and they themselves must not be treated as the foundation of knowledge. At least not the absolute foundation. We need something more solid at the absolute foundation. So, my senses have deceived me. That's easy enough. We've seen that. You fall for a trick of the light and think you see something that's not there. You look at a stick in water. Take a stick, an oar, put it in water. The part under the water looks like it's this way, and the part out of the water looks like it's this way. It looks bent. Why? Because of some sensory deception. If you fall for it anyway, and maybe you did when you were a child. Math. Once when I was sleepy, I multiplied 3 times 3 and got 12, or some such absurd thing. And then another time, I did another math mistake of comparable absurdity while wide awake, and this means reason can fail, and so we can't trust anything that relies on reason to be undoubtable, and we can't trust reason to be an absolutely certain foundation for knowledge. So now let's go to the text and see how Descartes goes through these exercises. Surely whatever I had admitted until now is most true, I received either from the senses or through the senses. Now this is really not necessarily what he thinks. This is a first exercise in systematic doubt. Surely whatever I admitted is most true before now, I got from the senses. However, I've noticed that the senses are sometimes deceptive, and it is a mark of prudence never to place our complete trust in those who have deceived us even once. And then he talks about how, even though the senses do deceive us sometimes, still there are many other matters concerning which one simply cannot doubt, even though they are derived from the very same senses. For example, that I'm sitting here next to the fire wearing my winter dressing gown, that I'm holding this sheet of paper in my hands and the like. So, speaking for me, I'm standing here in my office holding this green Descartes book. Maybe my senses have deceived me before, but Surely I can't doubt that I'm standing and holding a Descartes book, and I'm in my office right now. Surely I can't doubt that. And yet, there are crazy people who think that there are people whose brains are impaired by such an unrelenting vapor of black bile that they steadfastly insist that they are kings when they are utter paupers, or that they are arrayed in purple robes when they are naked, or that they have heads made of clay, or that they are gourds, or that they're made of glass. There are crazy people who have similar beliefs about what they are, where they're standing, what they're holding, that are just as, they're all that crazy. And that means there's something unreliable in the senses that are giving me my belief that I'm standing in my office holding the green Descartes book. And then, this would all be well and good. Oh, hang on. I should follow the thought processes of the text more carefully. Such people are mad, and I would appear no less mad were I to take their behavior as an example for myself. So I don't have to base my supposed lack of knowledge on the behavior of crazy people, right? Well, Descartes lets that one slide. This would all be well and good were I not a man who is accustomed to sleeping at night and to experiencing in my dreams the very same things, or now and then even less plausible ones, as these insane people do when they are awake. So when I'm dreaming, sometimes my ideas are just as crazy. So maybe I don't base my own waking supposed sanity. No, maybe I don't doubt my own supposed waking sanity on the basis of other people being awake and insane. But the fact that I, while asleep, have believed things no less crazy than what they believe, that must make me doubt. How often does my evening slumber persuade me of such ordinary things as these, that I am here, clothed in my dressing gown, seated next to the fireplace, when in fact I am lying undressed in bed. I could easily, in a dream, think that I'm standing in my office, holding a green Descartes book, talking about Descartes in a YouTube Rumble recording, and be lying in bed asleep. It could totally happen. Probably has. Well, I don't know, maybe not all the details, but I probably dreamed about recording YouTube videos before, probably. Almost certainly. Nothing comes to mind in my memories now, but they're not reliable, are they? But right now my eyes are certainly wide awake when I gaze upon the sheet of paper, etc. Such things would not be so distinct for someone who is asleep. I extend this hand consciously and deliberately, and I feel it. You don't have distinct feelings like that when you're asleep, do you? As if I do not recall having been deceived on other occasions, even by similar thoughts in my dreams. In a dream, you can think, all right, I'll make sure I'm not in a dream by moving my hand, and you dream you're moving your hand. You could believe that as evidence that you're awake when you're dreaming, the very evidence on which you base your belief that you're awake. I see so plainly that there are no definitive signs by which to distinguish being awake from being asleep. As a result, I'm becoming quite dizzy, and this dizziness nearly convinces me that I'm asleep. So these days, when we talk about Descartes, we really want to emphasize the Matrix, because, you know, that's the sci-fi show that defines modern thought to some extent. Well, I mean, maybe it doesn't anymore. It did in my day. Maybe we're outgrowing that cultural era, for better or for worse. Descartes now. Descartes has never seen the Matrix. Descartes makes more emphasis, places more emphasis on the dream thought experiment than the what if I'm in the Matrix thought experiment. Let us assume then, for the sake of argument, that we are dreaming. And maybe we're not actually doing these things. Maybe I'm not moving my eyes, moving my head, extending my hands. Maybe I don't even have such hands or any body at all. Nevertheless, it seems, it must be, admitted that the things seen during slumber are, as it were, like painted images, which could only have been produced in the likeness of true things. So things I think I see when I'm asleep are based on real things. Right? Right? Wrong. Because painters have painted things that aren't real. Sirens and satyrs. And maybe even stranger things than that. Imagine someone painting something from H.P. Lovecraft stories. You don't have to imagine it. You can Google it. You can find paintings of Lovecraft stories. And by the same token, although even these general things, eyes, head, hands, and the like, could be imaginary, still one has to admit that at least certain other things that are even more simple and universal are true. This class of things appears to include corporeal, physical nature in general, together with its extension, etc. So even if the weirdest ideas painted are not, even if the weirdest things ever painted or invented in a sci-fi movie are completely divorced from actual reality, still, it's not actually complete because they're still based on one thing that's real, on things extended in space, things that occupy space, on things that have size and color. That's real. Things that have size and color. That's totally real. But while it does not seem possible that such obvious truths should be subject to the suspicion of being false, I have heard of a God who has the power to bring it about that there is no earth at all, no heavens, no extended thing, no shape, no size, no place, and yet bringing it about that all these things appear to me to exist precisely as they do now. The entire physical world could be a deception caused by God. But perhaps there are some who would rather deny so powerful a God and believe that everything else is uncertain. Let us not oppose them. Rather, let us grant that everything said here about God is fictitious. So we're not necessarily believing in God either. We're just saying, as a thought experiment, God could have deceived us about the physical world in its entirety. But we still have an equally powerful thought experiment. I'll skip a bit, and then I'll go back to the part I've skipped, possibly. Descartes says, accordingly, I will suppose not a supremely good God, the source of truth, but rather an evil genius, supremely powerful and clever, who has directed his entire effort at deceiving me. I'll regard the heavens, the air, the earth, colors, shapes, sounds, and all external things as nothing but the bedeviling hoaxes of my dreams, with which he lays snares for my credulity. I'll regard myself as not having hands or eyes or flesh or blood or any senses, but as nevertheless falsely believing that I possess all these things. Perhaps a reference to Plato's cave analogy. Skipping just a bit, he says, I am not unlike a prisoner who enjoyed an imaginary freedom during his sleep, but when he later begins to suspect that he is dreaming, fears being awakened and nonchalantly conspires with these pleasant illusions. In just the same way, I fell back of my own accord into my old opinions. So a lot of the method of doubt in the first meditation here is designed to resist our habits, our customs of carelessly believing what we don't have good evidence for. Now, Descartes is, by the end of the whole book, you understand, going to restore all that evidence he's now doubting. Once he finds the proper foundation for knowledge, I exist, and uses it to prove that God exists, he'll then build on it all those old common sense beliefs. We won't be worried that we're dreaming or that we're in the Matrix, and we certainly won't be worried about the powerful demon who's deceiving us, but we will believe the old common sense beliefs again, and we'll base all our knowledge on them as before, most of our knowledge as before, but now on a proper foundation. So none of this doubt is long-term. At least most of it's not. Some things doubted don't get restored. The basic common sense principles actually do. What was I talking about? Yes. We tend to believe these things, no matter how hard I say, no matter how hard I resolve to not believe with certainty that which I don't have certain proof of, certain knowledge of, 100% certainty about. No matter how much I make this resolution, I'm still going to fall back into believing I have hands. Of course I'm going to believe I have hands. It's hard to not believe that you have hands, unless you actually don't. But then, try something else. Let's not quibble over those details. Everyone's got plenty of things. Most of us, nearly all of us, have hands, but hands, feet, noses, body at all. Anyone who doubts that he has a body is very unusual. But you must to go through the method of doubt properly. Anyway, you must resist your habits and customs of believing these things you don't have particularly good. You must resist your habits and customs of believing these things that are not established on a certain foundation yet. And a lot of the method of doubt focuses on resisting these habits and trying, because it really takes a lot of work, trying to not believe what we don't have solid evidence for. So now, with that in mind, let's go back to the two paragraphs I skipped. Eventually I am forced to admit that there is nothing among the things I once believed to be true which it is not permissible to doubt, and not out of frivolity or lack of forethought, but for valid and considered reasons. Thus I must be no less careful to withhold assent, henceforth, even from these beliefs, than I would from those that are patently false, if I wish to find anything certain. If you want to find anything certain, you must doubt everything that can be doubted, not just doubt that which is clearly false. You must doubt just as much anything that can be doubted at all as you would something which is clearly false. But it is not enough simply to have realized these things. I must take steps to keep myself mindful of them. For long-standing opinions keep returning, and almost against my will they take advantage of my credulity, as if it were bound over to them by long use in the claims of intimacy. So there we go. There's where he says, long-established opinions, long customs of belief creep back in, and he really has to fight them to make the method of doubt succeed. And the method of doubt does succeed, and we'll talk about its massive success in subsequent videos, getting to meditation 2. Thanks for watching.